Well, so he acted like a shaman, and perhaps even a higher stage, higher than a shaman, because shamans aren't necessarily spiritual, in my understanding, and often aren't. But Jesus' mission was intensely spiritual, and he wanted to take people to heaven, because he said, where I go, you will go also. The things I do, you will do also, and greater things even than I do. So, the fact that you could take this mushroom, this flesh and blood-like mushroom, and ascend to a heaven of light and love and bliss makes a very literal connection for me to Christianity and to this secret message that I think Jesus was handing out, not to the masses, but to the inner circle.
And this is the problem with the ancient pagan mysteries in general. They were mysteries. Everybody who participated was sworn to secrecy. And what's incredible, the mysteries of Eleusis were celebrated for 1,000 years in the Greek world. Many people, Roman emperors, Cicero, Seneca, all the greats, were initiates. None of them broke their oath and told us what happened. But we know that initiates drank a drink before they began on the sacred way to Eleusis, which was a painful purgatorial process. They were beaten by people with rods. It was meant to be a visceral, physical experience, and I feel that it was certainly heightened by fasting. So whatever, if they did take anything, then we know that would have been intensified, because it always is when you fast beforehand. Archaeologists have found opium pipes at Eleusis, so we've got enough hints to know. And the ancients were master pharmacopists. They knew all of the intoxicating, and it, as Tim says, it came out of the shamanic tradition.
In the heart of the Greek mysteries, the cradle of Western civilization, there was the Eleusinian mystery called, and you had the enactment of I guess Demeter and Persephone and all this going into the underworld, and then at the height of this maybe 6-day ceremony or something, they took a psychedelic, which they called this kykeon.
There is an illustration. It's used on Robert Graves' Greek myths, which is one Maenad, who were the female followers of Dionysus, holding up a mushroom.
Yeah.
So there are numerous hints that this was going on. I wouldn't be at all surprised if it's...
I'd go further. I'd say I'd be surprised if it wasn't true.
Yeah.
What we can't say, and the reason that Peter and I haven't pushed it in our research, is because if you're coming out and saying Jesus doesn't exist, it's such a confronting thing for most people that we've tried to keep to everything we can absolutely meticulously back up. But here is another possibility which others have looked into much more deeply than we have, and yet really, it would be such a surprise to see such a powerfully transformative process going on that didn't draw on this in some way, because they didn't have the same taboos which we've now got around changing consciousness.
Yeah.
And now you can look at Socrates' whole allegory of the cave and things like that, and you can, where people were just being in their cave and noticing the shadows and thinking that was the world, and then somebody turned around and they went outside and they saw the sun, and it's like, oh my God. He came back and wanted to tell all of his friends about it, and they absolutely wouldn't look toward the light, no matter what he did. They just wanted to stay entranced in their shadow worlds.
We are in this cave, we are watching shadows on the wall and mistaking them for reality, whilst the true source of light is from the mouth of the cave. And Plato even says, what would happen if a wise person came from the sunlight into the cave and said to people, look, you're just looking at shadows, this is not the real world? And then he says they would probably kill him.
So they say basically that's what happens with the mystic, and they've seen the light in a sense, and they're trying to tell their brothers and sisters, about the reality of their own sort of higher dimensions.
The way to understand religion is you've gone from a powerfully transformative event where you would take these psychoactives in a ritual context, probably alongside some sort of ritual death, and your state of consciousness utterly transformed, to a little bit of white wafer and some tiny sip of wine in a context where you're going to go back and sing.
But I think it must always be the function of organised religion to neuter, to emasculate the mystical experience. Because what you don't want is people having their own access to the divine. So if people are taking a divine and then having their own personal act, they don't need you. The whole point of organised religion is to mediate the divine. They are the intermediaries between you and God. That's the way organised religion works. So it must always, and I think it happened in Hinduism with Soma.
We were looking at the fly agaric mushroom, at which Gordon Wasson believed was the Soma. But at any rate, whatever Soma is, and I don't believe it's the Muskimo, I really don't. I believe it's more like psilocybin, or Steve Hager has even said it's cannabis. You know, if you read about it, it's like obviously cannabis. So at any rate, it was some kind of psychedelic, and it was a way for them to basically make contact with the divine.
The ninth mandala of the Rig Veda is entirely devoted to singing the praises of Soma, and yet we do not know what Soma is or was. R. Gordon Wasson spent a considerable portion of his life researching this problem and reached the conclusion that Soma was Amanita muscaria, a mushroom that is symbiotic to pine and birch trees throughout much of the North Temperate Zone. However, scholars have cast doubt on his identification of Soma.
It's quite possible that there were several different psychoactive plants used in sacramental forms in ancient India. In the most developed forms of Vajrayana Buddhism, the amrita that was used was called Panchamrita, which means the fivefold amrita. So there were 5 separate plants, I think. In the literature, in the scriptures, we're told of 5 different meats: horse, cow, dog, elephant, and man, the great meat. But I believe that these were different plants, and that when you had the fivefold elixir to drink, and you also ate in ritual context, ate a bite of each of the 5 meats, I think that was really drinking a concoction of 5 different plants and eating a little of the raw plant. And I believe that they were all different psychoactives.
Some sort of plant substance was prepared and ingested by a priesthood who then used the ecstatic experience induced by that plant as the basis for all of their metaphysical and philosophical speculations on the nature of the universe.
If you read the Rig Veda, all the Vedic hymns, out of 1,000